Alright, so in this video, I'm going to show you 5 great finger exercises that you can do every single day. You can do a couple of them a day, you can just focus on one a day. So there's 5 of them. I'm going to go through them. I'm going to go through all of them at the end, but the first one I'm going to take a little bit longer on so I can explain the way you should approach it with your first read through and then the way you practice it and build up speed on these. Because these are finger exercises, they're meant to be short and they're meant to help you just build speed. So I'm going to get into the first one here. Like I said, the first one I'm going to take a little longer to explain. Then I'll play through all of them for you so you can hear how they go. If you haven't done so yet, there is a link in the description to download these. They are free. It's a simple PDF download and you can follow along and then play it yourself. All right, so let's take a look at the first one. The first thing we should notice here is that in the treble clef, it's a treble clef, but in the bass clef, it's also a treble clef. So your left hand is going to be playing up here, starting with the C chord, C, E, G there. So that is our left hand, so we are playing the treble clef the whole time. It is 8 measures long, as we can see, mostly consists of just whole notes, quarter notes, and half notes. This is one of the simpler exercises here, but for beginners this will be great, and even if you're intermediate, it is always great to work on a piece like this. Alright, so now if you see the numbers on top of the treble clef at the very top, you'll see 1, 3, 1, 3, and so on. And then in the bass clef, you'll see 1, 2, 4. I know I said bass clef, even though it's written as a treble clef. I'm going to call that the bass clef just for reference. So those are the recommended finger numbers. You don't have to use those, but they are the recommended ones. They will work if you can't figure out your own, but if you can figure out your own that work easily, use your own. The key with fingers is really to pick one type of fingering that you like to use and then make sure you continuously use that as you practice the piece. You don't want to do this fingering one time and then this fingering a different time, right? So we don't want to switch it up. Once you pick one, it works for you, keep it with that one when you're practicing the piece. All right, and finally we'll see the time signature. It's written as a C. That stands for common time, which is the same thing as 4/4. All right, so now I will play through the piece for you. I will play it at a slower speed just so you can hear it, and then we'll show how we build up speed on this. So the first time you play a piece, I call it your first read through. You're going through it just to kind of figure it out. Your goal is not to play it perfectly necessarily. It's okay if you make mistakes. Your goal is just to get through it all, however long it takes, and just start to recognize the type of patterns that are happening and becoming aware of all sorts of things like that. All right, so here I'll give it a first read through. Now there is a repeat sign here, so you would go back to the beginning and play it again. I will show you that towards the end after I explain it. All right, so as we can see, it's a pretty straightforward piece. We're playing in the higher area of the treble clef, playing a lot of C, E, C, E, G, which is basically just spelling out the notes of the left hand. C chord in your left hand, right hand is playing the notes of the chord. Same thing when we switch to the G chord here, the first inversion G chord. We play notes of that chord. So Charity does that a lot, and that is very common. So you'll see that when he's playing a chord, a lot of times your right hand will be playing the notes of the chord. All right, so let's say your first read through, you made a few mistakes, no big deal. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to repeat, you're going to want to work on this a few times until it feels comfortable. You don't want to add in a metronome too early, otherwise it'll continue to throw you off. So what you want to do is, in my opinion, break it into, rather than to one thing of 8 measures and practicing the 8 measures over and over, break it down into sections of 2 measures or 4 measures. So for the sake of this, let's just say 4 measures is too much. Let's just do 2 measures at a time. So all you would do is start working on the first 2 measures. Even if you're playing it slow, that's okay. And even if it's not perfectly in time, that's okay. You get to the end of the second measure, you just go right back to the beginning of it. So you're going to do that as many times as it takes until you can feel comfortable playing it like. So you're going to want to do that with each section. So if you break it down into 2 measures each, there's 8 measures total, we break it into 2 measures each, you can break it into 4 parts. Get really good at part 1, which is measures 1 and 2. Get really good at part 2, which is going to be measures 3 and 4. Right? We can just practice those over and over again. And we'll put them in a loop like this. This really allows our hand to build the muscle memory needed to memorize the piece. So when you are practicing this, when you are working in these small sections, one, it's important to go slow at first. Don't try and play it fast before you really understand it. The goal is basically the more repetition you could do of playing it correctly, regardless of speed. Even if you go slow, your fingers get used to hitting the right keys. Your fingers memorize which notes to play because you're memorizing a pattern for your fingers. So that is why I said earlier, you do kind of want to follow the finger numbers because, or stick with one type of finger number because that's what your fingers are going to memorize to use. All right, so let's say you've worked on all the sections now. You feel comfortable playing each one without a metronome, just keeping the time in your head. So now here's what we're going to do. This is the last step to build speed. We now bring it down. I like to start at 60 beats per minute. It's a nice slow speed. It's very doable for the first level. So I'll try and play the whole piece with the metronome at 60. If I make a mistake, I'll find where that mistake is, I'll stop, and then I'll work on that section. So watch this. So let's say right there, I make a mistake in measure 4. I'll shut off the metronome and now I'll say, okay, let me see what's going on in measure 4. Left hand C chord, right hand is playing C. Okay, so it starts on left hand's a C chord, right hand is playing an E. Okay, so then I realize, I had played a C, it's really an E. So all I'll do is for a second, I'll just play that measure a couple times. Make sure I really have it down comfortably, right? There's no set amount of times you need to practice it, just until it really feels comfortable to you, where you feel very confident that you can play it every time with no hesitation, no mistakes. So I do that a couple more times. Now, instead of quickly turning back the metronome and going back for measure 1, what you want to do is also go back one measure from the one you're working on so you can, reference it back to where you're coming from. Sometimes you can get the measure down by itself really well, but actually the mistake is because you're coming from a different chord. That's the challenge to you. So then what you want to do is just go one measure back. So back to measure 3 here. Go slowly at first. Right? And even though I practiced it, it took me a second to get it there. So I want to keep working on that until I can smoothly transition. Like I said, you need to be confident that you can get it every time. All right, so now that I've done that, maybe I'll even put the metronome on just for that section and go back to, working on 3 and 4. With the metronome on. Maybe I'll do it 3 times in a row. Sometimes I like to get it 3 times in a row so that I know I've completed it and then I can feel confident moving forward. All right, so that was just 2 times in a row. All right, so then I would go back to the beginning, play it at 60, and that would be the process. If you play it from the beginning to the end perfectly at 60, do it again. Play it 2-3 times in a row. You want to get the whole thing down confidently. If you make a mistake then on measure 5, do the same process. Work on just measure 5, then go back a measure, work on them together, then learn how to fill it in with the whole piece. Keep the metronome at 60. Once you have it down at 60 and you really feel comfortable with the piece, here's what we're going to do. So you're going to play it once through at 60. So I play it perfectly, great. So realistically, you would go through the repeat, do it again. Now, as soon as you get it right at 60 and comfortable, move it up 10 beats per minute, and now try it at 70. And so on, you finish the piece, you get comfortable playing it at 70 before you move on, then same thing, up to 80. Do it at 80, same thing, go up to 90, until you can keep going higher and higher. Now, sometimes you may hit a wall. Sometimes you'll start at 60, you'll get to 80, and then that day you can't seem to get to 90. That's okay. Step away from it, come back the next day. At least you know your new starting point is 80. Maybe you start the day off at 70, then your goal is to get it to 90. So if you do this process, it'll make these exercises a lot more fun, and you'll be able to actually go through them much quicker. I know it seems slow at first when you're playing it slowly, reading it, but unless you're a great sight reader and this stuff comes easy to you, this is the process for learning any piece. You play it once through, learn how it goes, then you start breaking it down section by section to make it more manageable, get it in a comfortable speed, then start adding in the metronome and really, putting the finishing touches on it to memorize it. All right, so I'm actually going to play through all these pieces at a speed of 140 beats per minute. It's a great goal speed. If you can't get there, do not worry. If 100 is your top, that's okay. If 80 is your top, that's okay. You keep working on them and you keep building. I'd rather you master one of them and get 1 to 140 than be able to play all of them so at 90. So work on one at a time. It's a process to learn it, but you'll get it. All right, so here's exercise 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm not going to play the repeats for you, but you will want to repeat them. So here they are at 140. Here's number 2. Here's number 3. Here's number 4. And finally, here's number 5. All right, so that is all 5 exercises. As you can see, they definitely increase in difficulty. So if you don't feel you're at the level to do numbers 3, 4, and 5, or you just feel you're only ready for 1, don't worry about it. Just work on that one and you can build your way towards the other one. Like I said, I played at that 140. That is an end goal speed that can take months and months to get to. So don't feel like if you can't get there within a week, you're not doing well. If 80 is your max speed right now you have a new starting point. You know where to keep building towards. All right, so if you have any questions about these exercises or anything else and you want some other topics covered, feel free to drop a comment below, subscribe, and then reach out to me. I'm always getting back to people on email. My email is digitalpianoschool@gmail.com. I'm happy to answer any questions that I can and really cover any topics that you want covered. Thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe, and I hope to see you again soon.